I'm going to tell you about the longest ride I ever made, and it wasn't the miles. It was the 11 years between the leaving and the coming back. I was 22 the summer I rode out of Palin Creek, a ranch hand with a good horse, a few dollars, and the kind of pride that doesn't know yet what it costs. Marin Colby was standing at the fence line behind the bridal schoolhouse. She taught the valley's children and boarded with old Ressa Holt, and she said, quiet as anything, "You don't have to go, Cade." I told her I'd be back before the year turned, that I'd have something by then. Land, maybe. Something worth coming home to. She looked at me a long time. The sun was behind the ridge, and the sky had gone that deep burnt orange color that makes a man feel bigger than he is. Then she nodded once and said, "I'll be here." I rode out believing her and believing myself. The year turned, then another. I worked cattle up in the Garnet Range, saved what I could, lost some of it to a bad winter and a partner who turned out to be neither. I sent a letter in the third year, addressed it to the schoolhouse, told her I wasn't gone, told her I was still coming. I never heard back. I told myself the letter hadn't reached her. I told myself a lot of things. By year 5 I had enough for a small piece of ground up in the Wicker Draw, 30 miles north of Palin Creek, and I told myself that was the thing I'd been waiting to have before I came back. By year 8 the ground was proving out, the cabin was solid, and I had no more excuses. I just hadn't moved. Guilt will do that. It roots you to the spot like frost on a fence post. What finally broke it loose was a stranger stopping at my place one September evening, a traveling preacher heading south. I gave him supper and he gave me news without knowing it. He'd passed through Palin Creek 2 days prior. Said the schoolhouse on the creek was still running, same as ever. Said the schoolmistress there had been teaching in that valley going on 12 years, lived alone, hadn't married. I didn't sleep that night. I rode into Palin Creek on a Tuesday in October, 11 years, 2 months, and some days after I'd ridden out. The town had grown some, a new dry goods, a second livery, a proper hotel where the old feed barn had been. The creek road was rutted from a recent freight run. A woman I didn't recognize swept a porch. A man outside the hotel looked at me with the mild curiosity of a place that gets strangers and doesn't trouble over them long. The schoolhouse was at the south end of town, set back from the road, and the fence was there just as I remembered it. Weathered gray boards, one post canted a little to the east the way it always had. A few children were crossing the yard heading home, coats pulled against the cold. School was just out. I tied my horse at the road post and stood there like a fool. She came around the side of the building carrying a stack of primers and a bucket she'd been using to scrub the step. Her dark hair was up the way she'd always worn it. There was a steadiness in how she moved that hadn't been there when she was 20, or maybe I just hadn't been still enough to see it. She set the bucket down, stacked the primers on the step, and stood up. She saw me. She went very still. I took off my hat. "Marin." She looked at me the way you look at something you'd half convinced yourself you imagined. A long, measuring look. "Cade Whitlow," she said finally. Not a question. Not warm, not cold. Just the fact of me named aloud. "I know I'm 11 years late," I said. "Closer to 12. She picked up the primers again and went inside. I stood at that fence for another 10 minutes before I decided that she hadn't slammed the door, and that was something. I took a room at the hotel. The next morning I went to the land office, asked about a small parcel on the ridge east of town that I'd noticed riding in good southern exposure, a spring-fed creek, nobody working it. I put a deposit down. Then I went to the livery, asked if they needed a steady hand with their rough stock 2 mornings a week. They did. I wasn't hurting for money, but I needed something to do with my hands while I found my footing, and I needed the town to know I wasn't passing through. Word gets around fast in a valley that small. By Thursday, Marin knew I'd taken the room and the parcel and the livery work. I know because when I passed the schoolhouse that afternoon, she was at the fence, watching me come up the road. She didn't move away. I stopped. "I sent a letter," I said. "Year 3, I don't know if it ever came." She was quiet a moment. "It came," she said. Ressa Holt signed for it. She meant to give it to me. She passed that winter before she did. I found it in her things when we cleaned out the house. Year 4. Something went out of me and something settled in, both at once. You found it, I said. I found it. She looked at the ridge east of town, at the parcel I'd put the deposit on. That's Garver's old ground up there. Was Garver's. She didn't say anything to that, but she didn't walk away either. I worked the parcel through October and into November. I wasn't building fast. There wasn't a structure on it yet, just the clearing and the staking and the hauling of stone for a foundation. But I came out there every morning before the livery work and every afternoon after, and the ridge got to know my boots. Some evenings I'd see the schoolhouse lamp lit late, Marin working at whatever schoolteachers work at after the children go home, and I'd let myself look a minute before I turned back to camp. She started leaving things on the fence post. First time it was a cloth-wrapped piece of corn bread, no note. I ate it standing in the cold and didn't taste anything better in all the years before or since. Second time, a folded piece of paper with 3 names on it, men in the valley who could spare 2 days to help with framing if I brought the timber. I hired all 3. The third time it was just a small crock of soup, still warm, with a wooden spoon tucked under the cloth. I brought the crock back the next morning, scrubbed clean. Thank you, I said, holding it out over the fence. She took it. You always did eat like you were in a hurry to get to the next thing, she said. I wanted to make sure you ate something slow for once. I laughed. First time I'd laughed in I couldn't say how long. I'm not in a hurry anymore, I told her. She looked at me carefully. No, she said, I don't suppose you are. The framing went up the last week of November. 3 men and 2 long cold days and the bones of a cabin standing against the sky. Nothing finished, nothing livable yet, but the shape of it was there, 2 rooms, a good porch facing south, a window on the creek side. One of the men, a quiet carpenter named Pole who'd worked the valley 20 years, stood beside me when it was done and looked at it a long moment. You plan on being here a while, he said. It wasn't a question. I told him I did. He nodded like that was answer enough and collected his pay without another word. I stood back and looked at the framing the evening the last post went in, the light going red behind the ridge, and I thought about a fence post I'd stood at 22 years old and the things I'd said. I walked down to the schoolhouse. The lamp was lit. I knocked. She came to the door in her work dress, hair down now, a look on her face like she'd been half expecting me and half hoping not to have to deal with whatever came next. The framing's up, I said. I saw it from here. It'll be weathertight before Christmas, 2 rooms. She waited. Marin. I held my hat in both hands and I said what I'd ridden 200 miles to say and then taken another 6 weeks to work up to. I was a young fool and I cost us 11 years and I can't give those back to you. I know that. But I am asking, if you will give me the chance to not cost us any more of them. The lamplight was behind her, and I couldn't read her face right. The letter, she said. What did it say? I never told you I found it, so you never knew I'd read it. What did you mean to say to me in that letter? The same thing I'm saying now, I told her. That I hadn't forgotten, that the promise was still good, that I was coming. She was quiet for a long breath. The wind came down off the ridge and moved the dry grass along the fence. Then she stepped back from the door and held it open. Comin' out of the cold, Cade. We married in the Palin Creek Church the first week of December, 8 people present, the preacher's breath fogging in the cold air, Marin's hand in mine steady and warm. I'd asked her the night before if she wanted to wait for spring, for a bigger occasion, for something more suited to 12 years of waiting. She said 12 years was long enough to wait for anything. We moved onto the ridge parcel Christmas week. The cabin wasn't finished, there were gaps to chink, a floor section still rough cut, the porch rail not yet hung, but there was a fire in the hearth and a good roof and the 2 of us in it, and Marin said that was a home, not the finishing work. She was right about that. She was right about most things. I still get up before she does most mornings, habit of 20 years of living alone. I go out on that south-facing porch and watch the light come up over the ridge, and I think about a boy on a horse who didn't know yet what a sunset promise was worth. What any promise was worth. Worth keeping is what, every day. That's what I should have known at 22, and what I know for certain now. The only thing worth riding hard for was what I left behind. Everything else was just miles.